Hi guys, this is Karan here from Headphone Zone, and in today's video we'll be talking about 64 Audio's latest release, the U4s. Now before we begin talking about the IEM, let's talk a little bit about 64 Audio as a brand. Now for those of you all who have been in the hobby for a while, know about 64 Audio, and for those of you who don't, 64 Audio has been at the forefront of innovation, and they've presented some of the most revered and critically acclaimed IEMs like the U12T, the U18T and the Trio. Now these are some of the best IEMs money can buy, and it goes without saying that these come at a premium price. Now 64 Audio is a brand that continues to innovate, and they leverage a lot of patented technologies in their IEM, and that's also the case with U4s. We'll talk about all of the tech that has been embedded into the U4s ahead in the video. But that was a short introduction to 64 Audio as a brand. Now with that out of the way, let's talk in detail about the U4s and let's get this video started. Alright, so first things first, let's talk about the unboxing experience and everything that you get in the package. Now the unboxing experience is very standard to 64 Audio. You get this large package and everything is neatly arranged within this package. Now as soon as you open the box, you will be greeted with the IEMs and the cable that are perfectly arranged. You also get a 64 Audio leather carry case. Now within this case you will get shirt clip, you get a cleaning tool, and you'll get a fine assortments of ear tips that are again perfectly arranged in a ear tip holder. Now for the ear tip selection, they've gone for 3 pairs of spin fit silicone ear tips, 3 pairs of foam ear tips, and 3 pairs of 64 Audio tips. Now along with all of this, you also get the MX modules included in the package, and for this particular unit that we've got out here, we've got 3 MX modules, the MX, the M15 and the M20 module. Now besides the ear tips and the MX module, you also get a 64 Audio sticker, and that's all that you get in the package. Now overall, the unboxing experience and everything that you get in the box is fairly premium, and I personally feel this is a very well curated package. Alright, so now that we have the unboxing experience out of the way, let's talk about the build quality for the U4s. Now these are fairly well built IEM, and they exude that classic 64 Audio build quality. The shells have been made out of anodized aluminium, and they feel really sturdy and they can really take some wear and tear. Now what's new this time around for the U4s is the color selection that the team at 64 Audio have gone for. The shells are now available in a royal blue color, which is a first for 64 Audio, and to accompany that color or to complement that royal blue color on the shells, they've gone for a pearloid faceplate, and I must say it really looks very good. Now everything on the build quality seems really solid. It does not feel like there are any corners that have been cut in the making and the designing of the U4s, and I must applaud 64 Audio for putting in such great care and attention in the build quality. You guys have truly set a standard in the audiophile segment, especially for IEM. Now another thing that I want to talk about is the U4s has got fairly long spout. Now this is fairly understandable because when paired with the ear tips that you get in the box, they really allow you to wear the IEM for long hours without any strain or without any hot spots. Moving on, let's talk about the tech that's embedded in the U4s. Now as I mentioned earlier, 64 Audio has been at the forefront of innovation when it comes to IEMs, and they've leveraged a bunch of their patented technologies in the U4s. Now one of the tech that's been embedded is called TIA. Now what TIA stands for is tubeless in-ear audio, and it basically comprises of 3 elements, out of which 2 are embedded in the U4s. Now you get to see the TIA driver, which is basically utilized for the top end, and you get to see the TIA single board design. Now what essentially the single board design is, it eliminates any unwanted pathway to the spout of the IEM, reducing resonances and distortion. It basically essentially is one of the systems applied for you to get that clarity and the level of resolution that you get from the 64 Audio lineup. Now another tech that's embedded on the U4s is called Apex. Now Apex stands for air pressure exchange, and basically this is a system that allows you to choose the level of isolation and the kind of low end response that you get from the U4s. Now this is where the MX modules that come in the package come into play. Essentially, when you select either of the modules, you basically choose the level of isolation that you would like and the kind of low end response that you'd like. To clarify, now if you go and use a MX module with the U4s, you'll get minus 10 dB of isolation and you'll get a little bit of a bump in the low end. This module essentially gives you the widest sound and the lowest low end response. It's almost close to the neutral sort of sound. Now if you choose the M15 module, things change out here and they change quite drastically. You get 15 dB of isolation, which is a little bit less than your MX module. What essentially this means is the soundstage is just gonna narrow down a little bit, but what you get in return is a nice bass shelf. Now with this Apex M15 module, you really hear that thump and that punch in the low end, particularly in this M15 module. Now moving on with the M20 module, you get about minus 20 dBs of isolation, so the soundstage really narrows down. It becomes a really intimate listening experience, and you get a little bit of a higher bass shelf than your M15 module as well. So the bass out here is really visceral, it's really tight, it's really punchy, and all of these modules have a flavor that I think a lot of people will appreciate. Now from personal experience, I have tried using the U4s with all three modules, and I really prefer using them with the M15 modules. But I think the idea out here is, with the inclusion of all these Apex modules, person is free to choose the kind of low end response and the kind of soundstage presentation that they would like. Now another patented technology that's been utilized for the U4s is called LID. Now LID stands for linear impedance design, and what this is essentially trying to tackle is the issue when you connect certain IEMs to certain sources. They really don't sound the way they're supposed to. They essentially, the output power of the source device changes the frequency response, and hence you don't get a linear cohesive listening experience when you keep changing the source device. Now this LID tech basically ensures that you get the same sound signature, the same frequency response, no matter what the source device you're plugging into. Now to support this, and actually to support all the tech that's embedded and to really make the U4s shine, U64 Audio has also implemented electrical crossover rather than using dampeners. Now I know all these technical aspects or technical things may not matter to you as much, but they clearly do to the team at 64 Audio, and it's quite evident when you pick this IEM and listen to the first track yourself. Alright, so let's talk about the most important aspect of this IEM, and that is how do they sound. Now 64 Audio has a particular way of tuning their IEMs, and the U4s is no different. What is different this time around though is the driver selection that 64 Audio has gone for. Now the U4s basically features one dynamic driver and three balanced armature drivers, wherein the dynamic driver is working solely in the low end. There is a balanced armature working in the lower mid-range, there is a balanced armature driver working in the upper mid-range, and there is a TR balanced armature driver in the top end. Now the way that 64 Audio has tuned these drivers is just very tasteful, and it presents all the regions, the low end, the mid-range and the treble very well. So let's move on. Let's talk about each of these regions and their presentation in detail. Alright, before I move and talk about specific regions of audio presentation in detail, just wanted to let you all know that all my observations were done using the M15X module on the U4s. Alright, so moving on, let's talk about the bass presentation, and I think that's where the U4s shines and makes itself different from the entire 64 Audio lineup. Now as I mentioned, the U4s uses a dynamic driver for the low end, and this dynamic driver really shines. It's got the right level of resolution. It's able to present the texture in the low end. It's got the slam, it's got the right kind of punch, and I truly really enjoyed listening to a lot of different kinds of music. I've heard electronic music on this, I've heard some rock on it, and there were two particular tracks that I really used to test out the low end response on the U4s. The first one was a track by Boris Brejcha called Hold Your Speakers, and in this particular track the bass line hits a really really low note, probably in the lowest of the octaves, and the U4s was able to present that bass line quite faithfully and with a lot of rumble. Personally really loved listening to that track, and I just wanted to try out something different, a little slower, and that's why I played the Daft Punk Voyager track on this. Now this particular bass line is a synth bass line, and it's not living in the sub bass region, it's more in the mid bass region. And although the U4s is not very great with the mid bass presentation, but listening to Voyager on this was a delight. I absolutely loved it. It was able to play that lower BPM electronic track quite well, and I absolutely loved it. So in terms of bass, what you get is great quality bass. You may not get the highest quantity of bass, it may not be the fastest, it may not be the most resolving, but it's got that visceral, thumpy, rumbly kind of bass that I am sure a lot of you will come to appreciate. Alright, moving to the mid-range. Now, if you look at the frequency response of the U4s, you'll see a little bit of a dip scoop in the mid-range, and this might kind of alarm you that it may have a recessed presentation, but that's not the case at all. The mid-range presentation on the U4s is probably one of the most natural mid-range presentations that I've heard in a while in any price segment out there. It's got that really nice quality to present your string instruments, the vocals, the pads. It's just amazing. I was listening to the track Playing God by Polyphia, and all the guitars, all the finer nuances where the guitars are panned extremely to the left and right, they were presented with so much of accuracy and so much of resolution. It was just a joy to listen to it. Now, some of you are gonna really enjoy listening to orchestral music on this particular IEM because the upper mid-range out here is really the star. There is a certain amount of liveliness, there is a certain amount of clarity that you just don't get in a lot of IEMs these days. So in the mid-range department, I think it's probably one of the most natural 64 audio IEMs that you can get your hands on. Alright, moving on, so let's talk about the treble response of the U4s. Now, this particular IEM really surprised me because when I was looking at the frequency response of the U4s, I saw a bit of a dip in the ear gain region and a couple of more dips in the upper treble. Now, I thought this was going to sound on the smoother side of the spectrum, but to my surprise, I was completely wrong. When I put these IEMs on and was listening to certain tracks, the top end was presented very, very accurately. There's a right amount of airiness, there's a right amount of resolution, there's a right amount of clarity, and it just sounds right. I was playing this track called Whispers by Culprit, and the U4s was clearly able to present the bells that are in the top end of the spectrum. The cymbal hits were just perfect, the hi-hats were just perfect, there was an edge to the notes, and it just sounded fantastic. Now, having discussed how the U4s sounds, let's compare it to some of the IEMs in the same price range. And I basically took the time and I compared it with the Campfire Audio Andromeda Emerald C, and I also compared it to the new T Audio Monarch Mark III. Now, I'm going to be talking very briefly about the presentation in all three regions, that's the bass, mid-range and the treble. And I'll also compare the technical aspects amongst these three IEMs. So, as I've already discussed about the U4s, I'm just going to start talking about how do they compare with the Andromeda. Now on the Andromeda, basically you're gonna get a much more meatier low-end response. It's much more round, it's much more sub-bass focused. Although having said that, I'm not really sure whether that's one of the most cleanest bass you'll hear, but the U4s surely excels in the bass quality department. So moving on, comparing the mid-range between the U4s and the Andromeda Emerald C, I think the Andromeda has a little bit of deeper scoop, and because of that the mid-range really does not sound natural, whereas the U4s really shines in the mid-range. It sounds natural, and definitely the instruments in the mid-range, the vocals sound much better on the U4s. Alright, so now talking about the treble, it's a little bit of a tie between both of these IEMs. The treble on the Andromeda is a little bit different than the U4s, but nonetheless both of them are able to present the instruments that sit in the top end quite well. So if you were to ask me which is a more well-balanced or all-rounder of an IEM between the two, I would say the U4s. But having said that, the listening experience on the Andromeda is very unique, and of course it's got a cult following, and it's something that you need to try for yourself. If you want to watch our full review on the Andromeda Emerald C, you can click the link out there. Alright, so the other IEM that I compared the U4s with was the Audio Monarch Mark III. And this is where things get interesting. Now the bass on the Monarch Mark III is very different and very interesting. Something that I've not heard in many IEMs. It's got that texture, it's got that punch, it's got that slam, but where it really shines is the agility. Comparing that with the U4s, it just feels that it slacks a little bit. It's not as fast enough, it's not as responsive enough. Having said that, the quality of the bass on both of them is just phenomenal. Now moving on, the mid-range in the Monarch Mark III is something that I really did not enjoy too much. It's got a little bit of unnatural timbre to it, and I would just leave it at that. I think the mid-range on the U4s is just very natural, and I think having heard the U4s more, I really did not prefer the Monarch Mark III mid-range presentation. Now moving on to the top end, this is where both of these IEMs are completely different. The Monarch Mark III has got a very sparkly, very revealing sort of a treble response, whereas U4s is very controlled and very held back in comparison to the Monarch Mark III. The Monarch Mark III really presents all the upper treble details with a lot of airiness and shine. So does the U4s, but it just lacks a little bit behind than the Monarch Mark III. Now overall, if you were to compare the technicality, the instrument separation and the imaging, I think the Monarch Mark III shines in all those fronts. So comparison between the U4s and the Mark III is very interesting. They've both got their strengths and weaknesses, and I think they're both meant for different kinds of listeners. If you like more natural, then U4s is your direction to take. And if you like a technical IEM with that quick, agile bass, then the Monarch Mark III is where you should be going. Alright, so now having spoken about all the aspects of the U4s and having compared it to various IEMs, I think the U4s is probably one of the most compelling proposition in the 64 audio lineup. At its price point, it gives you a tuning similar to the U12T. It gives you that bass response that you'd miss from an all-BA IEM, and I think overall it's a complete package. So 64 audio U4s is an IEM I urge you all to try, and if you'd like to do so, I invite you here at our Experience Studio in Mumbai. And if you're not from Mumbai, you can catch us at a Headphone Connect event happening at a city near you. So that was it for today. I'll see you in the next one.